and welcome to another segment of Across the Nation, the news video ongoing series for American Free Press. I'm Mark Anderson, American Free Press writer, and my guest on this segment is Jerome Corsi, well-known author and WorldNet Daily columnist. And he today at the Freedom 21 annual conference here in midsummer 2008 here in Dallas, Texas, gave an overview of the North American Union and other aspects of it, Trans-Texas Corridor, some of the movers and shakers and ongoing events in this whole unfolding drama. And one of the things he focused on today that was especially interesting, and a lot of even the best informed Americans about this issue are not aware of, is the ongoing policy making and mapping and planning in Canada of, you might say, the northern portion of the North American Union and some of the physical infrastructure and the planning for that infrastructure. Mr. Corsi, thanks a lot for being with me.
Sure,
if you would, just sort of expound on the deep water ports you mentioned and what's going on in Canada.
Well, Canada has a national transportation policy which they call the Asian Pacific Gateway. And the whole idea is to open up these deep water ports on Canada's west coast in Vancouver and Prince Rupert, which is directly north of Vancouver. They're deep water ports, and they're actually the shortest direction to China. If you go on the Great Arc, it's actually shorter to go from China to Vancouver than it is to go to China to Los Angeles. So what Canada is planning to do is to open up these deep water ports and to have their transportation and railroad infrastructure across by the U.S. border, east to west, and then to have the railroad lines, especially from Canadian National and Canadian Pacific, drop down into the heart of the United States by Kansas City. One of the railroads goes right by the route of I-35. The other, whether it's Canadian National and Canadian Pacific, the other goes down what's going to be I-69.
So this is very lined up with these two major arteries that we hear about so much being planned for the United States.
Right, so the idea is the containers can come in from China through these two Canadian ports on the west coast, Canadian National, Canadian Pacific, and bring them right into the heart of the United States, to places like Kansas City, which is an inland port.
About 1,000 miles from the nearest border.
Exactly.
Interestingly, Canada could be making more progress in terms of their policy making and actual physical infrastructure than is happening in Mexico. Would that be true, or is the developments in Mexico and Canada roughly in parallel?
They're in somewhat parallel. Mexico's a little slower, but if you go, for instance, on the website of Nuevo León, the state in Mexico, right by Texas, right there at Laredo, Texas.
Yes.
They're planning to take this, not only to Lazaro Cardenas and Manzanilla through Monterrey. They extend the Kansas City Southern Railroad is now owns these railroads that connect those ports. But Mexico's planning to go all the way down into actually Colombia with a highway, superhighway structure, which sets up the transportation infrastructure for a Colombian free trade agreement on the way to a free trade area of the Americas.
The whole Western Hemisphere.
Whole Western Hemisphere.
What, 30 some odd nations?
Precisely. And the planning is very explicit in Nuevo León too. I mean, it's on their websites. The governor of Nuevo León proclaims that this is really a hemispheric transportation network they're designing to extend in Mexico.
But back to Canada, roughly in the same pace, roughly the same approach.
Yes. I think the Canadian websites and the Canadian government, Transport Canada, is actually more explicit. If you read their transportation planning documents, for instance, this Asian Pacific Gateway is a fully officially declared Canadian transportation policy, explicitly explained with the maps and the descriptions of opening these two ports specifically to bring containers from China into the heart of North America.
So they may not be flying it on their flag, but they're not hiding it either.
They're not hiding it all. Whereas our Department of Transportation, Mary Peters, comes to the hearings and she says, oh, we don't have a NAFTA superhighway plan. Then she spends the next 50 minutes testifying about how all of our roads like I-35, I-69 are designed to interface with Mexican and Canadian highways.
But nevertheless, here in Texas, it's sort of the front lines, the front battleground.
Texas is going to be the main transport center for goods from South America coming up through, for instance, this Colombia connection will come up through Mexico to Texas. Goods from the imports in Lazaro Cardenas and Manzanilla coming in from China and Far East will come in through Texas. And that's why Texas is the main gateway for these foreign goods and so-called free trade, world trade, to come into the United States.
Would it be accurate to say that a lot of people opposing the North American Union and its physical attributes, that is the NAFTA superhighway network, are kind of a miss and not giving Canada more focus? They're thinking too much about Mexico.
Yes, I think Canada figures strongly into this plan.
And this is really the news today that I saw as a reporter was, let's keep a closer eye on Canada.
Much closer eye on Canada.
Kind of that pincer between Mexico and Canada.
And as people are only focused on Mexico, they're not reading these Canadian websites, which are very explicitly disclosing.
What would be one of those websites before we sign
Well, just
off?
go and do a Transport Canada and start reading on that's their Department of Transportation, and start reading the documents where they're outlining how they're going to develop this Asian Pacific Gateway. There's a whole series of documents on the website which describe the policies.
And I would add in AFP that I put an article together in May where Canadian, American, and Mexican students are even doing mock parliaments. They did in Montreal. And so everything seems to be falling together.
American University has been conducting those.
And Stephen Blank.
Stephen Blank. They've been doing that under they have an organization.
NAFI, N-A-F-I.
Yes, NAFI, North American, I can't remember what the initials stand for.
North American Forum for Integration.
That's
that's
exactly.
it. Well, very good. I appreciate you being with me today,
Okay, Mark,
Jerome,
thank you very
Dr. Corsi. And he also, Dr. Corsi has another book coming out very soon, The Obama Nation. By the time you see this, that book will be out in, I'm told, stores across the country.
Yes, it'll be all over. Simon & Schuster's publishing it.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
I think it's a badly needed dose of medicine for the American people. We'll see you next time here on Across the Nation. I'm Mark Anderson with American Free Press. Stay tuned on AmericanFreePress.net and call 888-69-NEWS, 699-NEWS.